All right, so nice to meet you all. I'm very much blinded by the light, and now I want to sing. And it is weird to have my voice echo back at me. I apologize. So my name's Amanda O'Mara. I'm the regional manager for the state of Ohio. I'm mostly just in Cleveland and Columbus, or not Columbus, Cincinnati. I'm in Columbus right now. But the TEALS program is what I'm going to be talking about. My background, before I came to TEALS, I was a middle school tech and engineering teacher for a STEM. By the time I left, we were K to 12, but when I started, we were 6 to 12. But I am a self-taught coder. I did not take any coursework because the state of Ohio does not do great to train teachers to teach computer science, which is kind of why it led me to TEALS and my interest in the program. So in case you didn't know, some people are shocked by this, but not usually people in the industry. There is a huge gap in computer science education across the country and here in the state of Ohio. And if you're interested in any of these stats, code.org has glorious amounts of data and information. They collect this every year. They're one of our primary partners, but they update this so it's an accurate reflection of what's going on in the country. So I believe this is of 2022, 67% of all new jobs in STEM are in computing, which you probably know. But we are finding 53% of high schools nationally. In Ohio, it's 48%. We are 30th in the country for computer science education, which I hate saying out loud, but it's the truth, offer any kind of computer science. And then also too, 11% of STEM bachelor's degrees are in computer science. And that number is actually even lower for Ohio. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but I think it's about 6%. And a lot of those folks, especially in Ohio, don't stay here, they leave. Or they're not even from Ohio. Run into that a lot. So the TEALS program was started in 2009 by a Microsoft employee that was just stopping it at a school on his way into work to volunteer to teach computer science to some kids. He pitched this to Microsoft, turned into a fully fledged program. Kevin Wong is his name. He's on LinkedIn. He has moved on to mentoring, but he's still he's the grandfather of TEALS, so he keeps in touch with us. But this program was set up to bring more computer science classes to schools in the US and BC, Canada, and we have an international presence now. But we're targeting schools where there are a large population of historically excluded students, which is pretty much every high school. People are always afraid that we won't partner with them. I'm like, if you have girls enrolled, if you have black or brown students enrolled, that is a first thing meeting our qualifications. Income, Title I funding, all of that. We look at that, but if you have one of those populations, you're a high school we'll work with. But we do this not just by handing out curriculum and telling the teachers to figure it out. That doesn't work. We partner with the teacher to get training in whatever the curriculum is that they choose, and I'll talk about those in a bit. And we place industry volunteers in the classroom with them, either remotely or physically in person, to co-teach the classes for the whole school year. Covered a lot of these points. So because of our TEALS impact, we hit around, I think it's like 10,000 students every year, but that number is multiplied by the fact that that teacher is now comfortable teaching computer science, pursuing licensure, and their impact will continue to carry on for however long they continue to teach, which that's a whole nother conversation. So our program doesn't work without volunteers. We do not take schools that don't take volunteers. That's kind of the whole point. So the reason the volunteers are so important, as I alluded to earlier, is in a lot of states, there's not a direct and clear pathway to become a computer science teacher. There is no bachelor's of computer science education in the state of Ohio. It doesn't exist. You can't even pursue licensure directly. Currently in the state, if you want to become a computer science teacher, you need to pursue CTE, which is Career Technical Education, which usually requires you to major in computer science and then decide to be a teacher. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm pretty sure most people that go into computer science make at least twice as much as teachers do. So that doesn't happen very often. Business is another pathway, but there's no required computer science coursework. Or what most of the teachers in Ohio do is they get a license in one area, like math or science, or I've had art teachers, physical education teachers, former home ec teachers, anyone that's passionate enough to do this, they will pursue a supplemental license. For the state of Ohio, the license is grade banded K to 12, which means every single teacher is learning object-oriented programming, whether or not it makes sense for them to learn it. If you have strong feelings on this, there's a budget bill in the House and the Senate right now. DeWine has already backed it, but we're looking for more supporters. I can talk to you after about that, but the goal is to change that to 3 different grade bands. But that's going to take years for us to get there, and we don't have time to continue to wait for Ohio to catch up. So TEALS has been working mainly in Cleveland since 2017. We were brought there by the Cleveland Foundation as one of their education initiatives. I'm actually partially grant funded by them in partnership with the Greater Cleveland Partnership. And we've worked with, I've got it on another slide, I want to say 30 to 40 different high schools across Northeast Ohio, but we've done a few in Columbus and Dayton, Cincinnati, randomly. But we fill in the gaps that the teachers are missing from that supplemental licensure, if they've even started it yet, by having the volunteer in the classroom to help co-teach. The volunteer also supports the teacher's learning. So the teacher is supposed to be learning, taking notes, absorbing everything in, asking questions. I encourage my teachers to ask the volunteers questions about the licensure exam, the content that's on it. And then the teacher can kind of take a step back and let someone else run their classroom, which is a huge ask. If you've ever been a teacher or know a teacher, you're the only person in the room most days, so relinquishing that bit of control it's a huge thing. But they see the importance and the impact when students are connecting with the volunteers better than the teachers. I've heard many stories of students coming back to talk to the volunteer that they had rather than the teachers. But they get to learn what the industry is actually like from somebody that's in it. I always say students don't listen to teachers. We're basically a third, fourth, however many parent to them. I could tell them that they are the smartest, brightest, amazingest kid, and they won't listen to me. But if it comes from volunteer that they just met, it means worlds. So I'm sure you guys have read that. So our impact is huge. We're not just obviously an Ohio-based program, which is funny. I hate where they put the dot. We are not in Columbus. It needs to be up further. But my goal is to pick up some Columbus schools eventually. But these are our other regions. So if you know folks in your organization that are on the other coast, somewhere else in the country, there are opportunities to volunteer everywhere. Especially if you're up in Detroit. We have 3 Amandas in Detroit, 1 Amanda in Ohio. So yeah, we have over 650 different companies represented. We are not just a Microsoft program. This is one of those, we play nice. We pay into code.org. We support computer science for anyone from anywhere. We have Amazon, Meta, Google. Every major tech company has volunteers with TEALS. So we're not just creating little Microsoft MVPs to go out into the world. Here's the number, 1,400 students we impact in a school year, and that number increases every year. We're always adding new high schools and new regions. The Southeast has been a major expansion for us. In Ohio, we have about 32 different companies and organizations. I have some college students that volunteer as well, and around 39 tech volunteers supporting 18 different classrooms. And that's across 15 different schools. And that's just a sampling of where my volunteers are coming from this year. Microsoft and Highland giving me the most volunteers, but always getting new people in. I'm always excited to see other companies. So, as I mentioned earlier, we traditionally focus on students that are excluded from computer science. We have good data from code.org about the number of AP computer science students, or students that take the AP computer science exam, which if you're not familiar with, that is considered a college-level course. They sit for a college exam, and if they score, I think it's a 3 or higher, they get college credit for having taken it. Very few students that are Black, African American, or Latino take that exam. In Ohio, I think it's less than 6%. I think that number is actually even lower. But because of TEALS in Cleveland, our number's much higher, and we're kind of carrying the state. I think the last number I heard was 85% of our Black and African American and Latino students took the AP exam last year. But we find that those students, even if they don't do well on the exam, they're more likely to major in computer science. They've gotten a taste of it. They can see that this is for them. And they're more likely to go for that as a potential major for college. And then for women, they are 10 times more likely to pursue computer science. And for TEALS too, like a lot of our schools, it's not even getting the kids to major in computer science, it's being able to even try it. It's a huge commitment to go to college and major in something. Very few people change majors. I actually had a conversation with some of the folks at Ohio State, and I asked, how many students are switching into computer science after they get to OSU? And they said, it's nobody. They lose more than they bring in. And a lot of the career development focus has been on our colleges, which is important, but if we can't even get the kids to the colleges, then what's the point? So for us and for me, it's important for them to see that college is an opportunity, but it's not the only thing, that there are other ways to get there. A lot of my volunteers come from non-traditional backgrounds. They've done boot camps. I have self-taught folks. I have people that have switched careers. It's important for them to know that that option is there. Even if they don't choose to pursue it at first, that exposure and experience, I have heard from volunteers that took computer science in high school, majored in something else, and then went, you know what, I should have done it. Should have done computer science. And they're there to make sure that the kids know that this is something that they can do. So obviously, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a huge part of everything we do. We work with the school and the volunteers to develop a plan. So before the school year starts, so about now, our schools are learning about the DEI process, thinking about what happened this past year, and then thinking about what they would like to do next year. And then during the school year, we're actually implementing whatever actions they choose. And we have, I think, 16 different areas that they can choose to work in. And then we're constantly reflecting and adjusting those plans. The volunteer is an important part of that because as a co-teacher, you're going to be enacting some of those actions. So we also ask for your input and contributions early in the school year so we can make sure that it's a vision for the whole team, not just one person at the school. I've had volunteers that have done career days, gone into other classrooms to talk about the program. Some of them have gone so far as to decide to run after school programs. I actually have a couple esports coaches that the teachers were like, could you do this? Like, it would be amazing. And I never require anyone, and I'm always excited to hear someone decided to do a little more. So I realize a lot of people here, probably from Columbus or nowhere near Cincinnati or Cleveland, we do remote volunteering, and we've done it for a long time. TEALS started doing remote support in 2012. So obviously before the pandemic, because we realize our volunteers don't always live in the communities where the need is. You know, down in Cincinnati, most of my volunteers live in the outer belt in Mason and Westchester. I have someone in Milford, but my schools are downtown. So a lot of my Cincinnati volunteers are actually remote because it's an unfair ask for someone to drive basically an hour and a half round trip to volunteer for an hour. And they still have a good experience. You get it from it what you put into it. If you just want to sit there and stare at the kids, they will just sit and stare at you right back. If you get lively, put on the performance. I always say pretend the curtain comes up and do your teaching. That's how teachers work. Get through the content, curtain back down, go back to introvert hermit mode, and you've done your peopling for the day. But I have a volunteer that's in Cincinnati who's been volunteering in East Cleveland for 3 years. He's actually coming up on his 4th. The teacher refuses to let him go. He's kind of built into the walls at this point. The students call him Uncle. To the point now where the teacher and I refer to him as Uncle McDonough as well. If you don't know Sean McDonough, he's a cool dude. You should connect with him on LinkedIn. But he's a great example of how well remote instruction can go. He engages with the students directly, learns their names. They come to him with questions, but they're also required to talk to him. I hate to say they have to be required, but in classrooms where they don't, it doesn't happen. A lot of my remote classrooms use breakout rooms, so that way you have the opportunity to talk one-on-one, small groups. And then you have an opportunity to make an impact even if you're nowhere near a TEALS school. And then, let me see. I have a video.
When I was in high school, nobody told me that you could make a career out of computer science or coding. And that was a huge factor for me in becoming involved with TEALS, volunteering remotely, because I wish I had that person in my life.
Volunteering remotely makes just as much difference as volunteering in person. You're going to bring all that knowledge to the table and share that knowledge with the students. And knowledge is power.
A typical day when I teach with TEALS is I follow my normal routine. I get coffee, and then I sit down at my desk, which is right next to my bed because I'm working in my bedroom. And then I go right to teaching. I just log on to the website, and I click into my class, and I'm pulled up into a virtual classroom.
The first 15 minutes or so, it will be a lecture portion led by volunteers or a classroom teacher. And then the last 30 to 40 minutes will be actually breakout room sessions where we go and work with the students individually or in groups.
I know I was a little unsure, but open to volunteering virtually. But That is just the best feeling in the world, to be able to help somebody to gather the knowledge and the confidence to learn computer science.
I think that the opportunity to give these kids this background and understanding in computer science is going to open doors for them
To connect with students on a more personal level.
Working in small breakout rooms, I think, is a lot more inviting for students. It makes us as instructors a lot more accessible to the students.
And I have to say that's pretty important, because the kids get a lot of really close attention and are able to receive the support that they need.
Ultimately, the TEALS model is that we want to support the teacher and the school so that they are able to be self-sufficient in the future.
So as a TEALS volunteer, it is a very collaborative partnership with our teacher. Our teacher is the lead of the classroom.
From an instructional standpoint and from a classroom management standpoint, we got you covered. The teacher will provide you with that support that you need.
Anybody that's programming really has a great opportunity to make an impact on society and in your community. Just giving a couple of hours a week is going to be so impactful for the teacher, the student, and the school.
I think it's just such a great opportunity for students to actually have a career that can not only change their life, but it can impact generations to come.
When we work with students, we hold a lot more power than we think we do. Now students can change the world, but if they don't have someone tell them that, they might not believe it.
So apologies for the lag there, but generally, I hope you followed along with it. And I kind of like that video because it shows some of the curriculum we use. I think that was the code.org CS Discoveries. And I apologize. I realized I could turn captions on a third of the way. So the volunteers are such an important part of our program, either remotely, in person, and I even have people that do, I'm calling hybrid, where if they can come in, they do. I had a volunteer this past year. She goes to Colombia for 2 months just because she can go to Colombia and work, and she's still in the Eastern time zone. So she went from being an in-person volunteer to remote for 2 months and then came back. She didn't have to do that, but she's like, I'm just working out of Colombia. It's not a vacation, so to speak. But that was so awesome that she arranged that, worked with the teacher. So, you know, remote volunteering, just like remote work, can be done from anywhere. So through the program, like, we don't just recruit you and say, here's a class, figure it out. Like, absolutely not. This is our recruiting season because we provide training over the summer. All of our training is remote, virtually run, nights and weekends, multiple times during the summer. And this is a great time to come in because we're down to 2 required trainings. From when I started, there was 4. They compacted and consolidated. So we have an orientation and then a 3-hour training in how to teach computer science. We're not going to drill you over how to use a function or an array or anything like that, but more of how do you ask questions. It is not the way you would normally do it with a room of adults. You have to do that thing called wait time, where you stand there for a very uncomfortable amount of time and wait for an answer. If you remember that from your school days, it's the worst, but it works. We have some other strategies we use that we teach our volunteers. We also have teachers are going through a very similar training of how to teach computer science while they're learning how to teach the curriculum. And then we also do a lot of team planning. We have 2 official sessions that I moderate, that the teacher and the volunteer team get together, talk about what the school is like, what the, you know, how do I come in, where do I park, am I allowed to let kids go to the bathroom, what do I do if someone's climbing on a desk throwing things? The answer is get the teacher. But that way you get to know them, you're connecting before the school year starts and creating that plan. And then we have another meeting after school starts to talk about those diversity, equity, and inclusion plans. Because like I said, it's a team effort. We don't want one person in particular just dictating everything. And then we encourage our teams to continue to meet weekly. Some of them do bi-weekly in some fashion. Some of my teams use Teams, or Zoom is more likely, to meet on a weekly basis so they can talk about where are we at in the curriculum, who needs extra help, is there an assembly on Thursday and I don't need to be here. I've come in to observe and had things pop up that we didn't know. I got to watch a clap out of our nationally placed chess team at East Tech High School. So I was excited to be there for it. But those kinds of things you need to obviously, hopefully communicate in advance. That was an impromptu event. And then, we encourage that communication through the year. Successful teams communicate regularly, and that's why the teacher and volunteer relationships with my schools, they end up becoming lifelong friends. I lose more volunteers to teachers graduating from the program and keeping them, so to speak, than any other reason. And that's a good reason to leave. I've had that conversation a few times this year. I have a bunch of graduating teachers. I'm sure Uncle McDonough I mentioned earlier, he's going to stay with Monique up in East Cleveland for the rest of his life. They actually get together in Cincinnati and hang out and do stuff. Her son goes to UC. So it's an amazing relationship. I provide class visits, come in to see how things are going, what feedback I can give. I also do volunteer check-ins. I will either physically take people out to coffee or we'll talk remotely, just so I can hear how things are going. This is the first year we started doing this since the pandemic, and it's been so wonderful getting to know all 40-something of my volunteers. And it gives me insight into what's going on in the classroom and things I can try to help with or I can reach out to the school about. And then throughout the year, we have a lot of events to celebrate our volunteers, to allow you to network, meet others. This past April, I did a community event at Mitchell's Ice Cream. I know Jenny's and Grater's are bigger down here, but Cleveland, it's all about Mitchell's. I booked a private room, gave everyone free ice cream, and we had a great time. We do one of those in the fall, one in the spring. And then we also do virtual versions of those as well, because I realize my volunteer from Baltimore is not going to drive to Cleveland for ice cream. And then obviously dedicated regional manager, which for Ohio is me, always here to answer questions or provide support. So what a typical week for most of my volunteers, and it's wildly different from school to school, but generally we see about 1 to 3 hours a week spent on prep, and that really depends on your familiarity with the content being taught. It's usually just looking at the lesson plans, whatever activities are coming up, and being ready to teach that. And then also, too, that includes your team planning time, so meeting with your team to hear what's going on. And then our ask is that our volunteers come in twice a week. It says 2 to 3 hours, but I prefer her saying twice because every single school has a completely different school schedule. So I have some that are on block schedules. I have some that meet every day. I have one school that has a color-coded schedule that I cannot follow for the life of me, but they get it. But we work with the team to make sure that those hours fit your schedule. We don't even place you at a school until we've discussed your schedule. Most of our classes are scheduled in the first period of the day, which for most schools is 8 a.m. to 9:30, 10 a.m. And then that's why I said come in twice. If you can't stay till 9 o'clock for some reason, it's unfair to say, no, you got to stay for the full hour. If you can come in twice, that's great. You come in once, that's great too. If not at all, just make sure the team knows you're not coming, but we work with those schedules. And then obviously, again, teaching remotely or in person, that'll kind of vary if you're going to add some commute time. So the courses we support, we've expanded. When I started, it used to be 3 core subjects and then this random mishmash category. Now we have 5 fully fledged areas, and we offer all 5 in Ohio. Intro to Computer Science is exactly what it sounds like. It's a bit of a survey. It's freshman, sophomore level, but we do get juniors and seniors in it, depending upon when the class started being offered. And kind of backing up for a second, our curriculum is from whatever provider the school chooses to use. We have a whole big long list, I can send you the link on the TEALS page, of all the providers we partner with. Code.org is a very popular one in Ohio because it's free, it's easy to use. I used it when I was teaching. So when I talk about these, most of them are Code.org schools. But the Intro to Computer Science gives them just kind of a foundation, a little bit of a touch into a lot of different subjects. They learn a little web design. They do usually a block code that's based in JavaScript or Java, and they get to do a little bit of block coding. There's a little bit of cybersecurity, digital citizenship. It's all very like toe in the pool, not getting too deep into anything. We're just trying to get the kids interested. Then we support 2 AP courses. Those are those college-level classes. One is Computer Science Principles, which is structured like a survey, but it's a more intense, deep dive into subjects. There's a whole unit just on algorithms. They spend like a month on them. There's a whole month on building an app, like phone app, using that block coding language that's JavaScript, that they can turn it off and actually code directly in JavaScript if they're comfortable, or they can continue to work in the block. But they get prepared to take an exam. Part of that exam is creating a project, so typically the kids code something, usually an app for that project, and then they have not a written test, but like a normal sit down, no, they don't fill in the bubbles anymore. I think they push, my daughter was just complaining she had to push buttons all day for their state test. But a traditional exam with long response and multiple choice questions. Most of my schools are wrapping that up this week. And then for the remainder of the school year, they have a unit in AI that they can cover, or they go back and cover something else the kids were interested in. A lot of my schools offer computer science principles because it was specifically developed to be accessible to Black, African American, and Latin students. It is no prerequisite. If you've ever taken an AP class, usually you have to take something else first. This is not like that. So some schools, the kids go straight into this AP computer science principles having no experience whatsoever. But this class, we find when kids take it, they're more likely to pursue more computer science. Computer Science A, this year I have one school offering it, and that is a Java course. It is basically whatever the freshman level Java course is in college. Our kids don't do well on this exam. It's very difficult. If you remember those days, it was probably challenging for you. But we find from doing student surveys that the students are coming back and saying, this course made my college level course super easy. And in fact, I was mentoring and tutoring other students. We had a couple kids from a Cleveland high school that went to OSU, and they were pulling out their notes from TEALS and going through what they had learned, and they were teaching their classmates. So even though they're not going to get the 3 or the 4. We've had nobody in Cleveland, as far as I know. Just getting to take the class, sitting for that exam is setting them up for success later. It's free to take an AP class. College classes that you fail, you got to pay to take those again. That's how I sell it to students. And then our 2 new areas, we started cybersecurity this past year, and then we've also expanded this current year into data science, machine learning, and AI. And the AI I'm seeing, because of all the stuff in the news, and I'm not going to go into it, we're going to see more of these next year. Code.org just announced they're creating curriculum, a full year curriculum for AI, and they already have units that are out there that teachers are using. So I expect to see that course grow immensely. But the cybersecurity course, I have 2 schools this year. I have several more schools that are interested, that they're building capacity toward that. They use cyber.org's curriculum. If you haven't looked into it, it's an amazing National Science Foundation funded program. CISA and like every major cybersecurity national organization is backing it. And it's amazing because it's all web-based. They don't have to have any special software, special machines. It's all browser-based, ethical hacking, even with their own in-house cyber range. So I have a lot of schools that are into it. Ohio's invested a lot into cybersecurity, and I expect that class to grow beyond just the 2 I have this year. So I want to put this out to anyone that's within an organization that's in a leadership position. I'm always happy to come in and talk to teams. I've done info sessions with Highland Software, Cognizant Technologies. We're always excited to see teams of volunteers. We even will place people together. But we've heard from our volunteers, we do surveys, that this is a positive experience. They enjoy their work more, especially when their employer is supporting them being there. But they're also reinforcing some skills that you don't necessarily get to work on in your day-to-day, namely getting up in front of people and talking. But then you're also building connections with your community. And for a lot of things to do with education, the only way we're going to fix them is if we get involved in our local communities. And this is a great way to get there. I've had so many volunteers come back and go, I had no idea that this is what schools were like. Either school was a long time ago or they had a completely different schooling experience. Many of our schools are urban. They have a whole different set of things that they're worried about versus suburban and rural schools, which we have both of those, but it's such a different experience that I find my volunteers are more willing to do more outside of TEALS to help make education in general better. And then this is a direct way to impact the tech talent pipeline. There's a lot of talk out there about what we can do, and it's a lot of talk. I go to pretty much any tech conference I can go to in the state, and people do a lot of this, but there's not a lot of action. This is direct action. You can go into a classroom and work with a group of 5, 10, 15, no more than 20 students, and get them interested in being in the industry. You are essentially working on training someone that could be your future coworker, someone sitting next to you in this theater. We have gotten to the point where we now have TEALS students that have graduated and are coming back to volunteer with us. We had a webinar last month and we featured a couple of those students. One of whom's up in Detroit. He works with a nonprofit teaching code in his community while he's working on his bachelor's degree. And he wouldn't have been there if not for a field trip by a TEALS employee to a Microsoft office. He didn't think school was for him. And just having someone there that cared and was willing to introduce him to people changed his whole life. And we're getting more of those stories. We're actually starting a TEALS student alumni program for the kids that come back to volunteer with us because there are so many. But I do want to highlight a couple of my volunteers because I can speak about others and that's all well and good, but these are the people that matter to me. I am closely partnered with Get With It in the state of Ohio, mostly the Cleveland and Cincinnati chapter. Cleveland, I helped revive their organization after the pandemic. So they gave us a social media takeover for Volunteer Appreciation Week. month, whatever. So this is one of my volunteers, Molly. She's at Villa Angeles St. Joseph. She came in mid-year. I think it was November when she came in, and they were having a lot of trouble. They were struggling. They'd switched curriculum. The remote volunteer was having trouble hearing and engaging, and she just completely turned this classroom around. She works at MIM Software over on the east side, and she was able to arrange a field trip to her workplace for the students to be able to come and meet other people, see what a day in a life was like, and now they are starting to grow interest in more coursework. Right now they only offer an intro to computer science. So she's got students that are looking for internships now that had no interest at the beginning of the year. Some of them just got thrown in the class or took it because nothing else could fit. And just from her presence and her colleague, Annie, those two working together, it's a beautiful machine. So that's Molly, and she's actually on the board for the Get With It in Cleveland, thanks to me. And you, of course, I had to feature Uncle McDonough. He actually, funny story, I moved to Cincinnati last year, and he lives like 2 miles down the street from me now. But he helped me move. That's kind of the awesome relationships we build in our program. But he was in the MVP program when he started with TEALS, heard about it through Microsoft. He's since gone on, he runs his own business now. But he's been with East Cleveland for 3 years. His teacher, Monique, has taken TEALS and run with it. They are doing, in addition to the curriculum, they're doing drones. She's a spokesperson for a company that sells microbits, to the point they sent her an oversized microbit that works. She's done Unity trainings in Cleveland. She was a special education teacher. She didn't have any experience in computer science. Now she's officially a full-fledged computer science teacher working on her CTE certification, offering cybersecurity next year. And she couldn't have got there without Sean. And he'll be learning cybersecurity this summer because she refuses to let him go. Sarah is another board member with Get With It. She's one of my Highland software employees. She's been with the school for, they graduate this year, so I think 5-6 years. She just had a baby, and that's the only reason she's leaving for a year, which I suppose that's a good reason. But she's worked so hard with those students that her school that she's been supporting is now filling a pathway. Her teacher is teaching computer science principles, computer science A, and now I have a new teacher coming on board to offer intro because they went, we need to get more kids into these AP classes. So they're offering 3 sections of that intro course now because of the work of the previous teacher and Sarah. Alex is a volunteer from a unique background. She was an art teacher and self-taught herself cybersecurity. She has always been interested in the intersections of art and technology, so that's kind of what led her there. So she's been supporting my first cybersecurity class in West Cleveland. She's an independent consultant. She works for, I think, their family business. But she is in Akron and going up to Cleveland, so that's about an hour drive. And she's doing that whenever she can or coming in remotely. So this is one of my hybrid volunteers. But she's been a great person to have in that classroom because she had that teaching background and experience. And the teacher is actually a former IT person for the district. So not only is she helping teach cybersecurity, she's been helping this career changer learn how to teach more effectively. She's been absolutely amazing. She did a panel for me with Get With It in the, there's a fruit fly up here. I'm not just going like this for fun. But she was on a panel discussion we had about getting kids interested in STEM. I know she's moving on this year. There's always things happening, health and family. And then Sumit Sengupta, he is in my 5-year volunteer club. He gets his hoodie this year. He's been at many different schools in Cleveland, and he's always happy to go wherever he is called. So this year, he's at Elyria Catholic High School. The teacher was already familiar with computer science, so he hasn't had as much to do. Sumit took it upon himself to learn cybersecurity curriculum, and the teacher's letting him teaching it. So he's teaching AP Computer Science principles a couple days a week and cybersecurity on Fridays just for fun, and the kids are digging it. It was like just an impromptu thing. The teacher was like, cool, let's go for it. And they're just, the school's graduating, but now I get to send Sumit to another school to do cybersecurity officially next year. But he's been one of my biggest fans in Cleveland. He's another former Microsoft person that's moved on. So I always put that out there, like we have Microsoft people, but they move on and they stay with us. That says a lot, I feel like. Okay, so my big ask, such an intense slide. If this is resonating with you and it sounds like something you fit into your schedule, apply. I take applications until the application closes, I think in December, and then it opens back up in February. We're always recruiting. The requirements are up there. You all fit the requirements. We just want people that are passionate about teaching computer science and know something about it. The process is pretty easy. The application takes like 30, 45 minutes. There's a lot of questions on there. I just tell people, answer them best you can. I'm gonna probably ask you 50 questions later anyway, so don't feel like you have to spend a ton of time on it. But I do interviews with everybody, not only to get to know you, but to make sure this is the right fit, that we're finding the right school, right curriculum, all that good stuff. I spent the whole week interviewing people. But if it's not for you, and we're one of those people that will admit that this is a huge ask. 2 days a week for a whole school year from August to May, June, that's a lot. So if this isn't for you at this point in your life, or you don't know if it ever will, that's okay. Our ask is that if you know other people that would be interested, that you share this with them, amplify our message. I'm one of the social media people for TEALS. I lasso and kind of try to control the Twitter. It's mostly calm. We lost and got our check mark back like 12 times. We have a yellow one now, if anyone cares. We are not a blue check mark. But lost my train of thought. Oh, amplify our social media posts. LinkedIn is such a huge source of volunteers for us. I'm always on the LinkedIn grind from April to July. Or if your organization might be interested in having volunteers go, reach out to me. I'm always happy to come and do a talk, lunch and learn, whatever. So I have my LinkedIn on there. If you look me up, I think I come up pretty quick. I am not the chiropractor. What was the other one? We were doing this yesterday. We were Googling me to see who comes up on LinkedIn. I don't know what the other one is. It's obviously the girl with the purple hair. But feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'll take questions here in a minute. I have a thank you slide, but I'm going to go back to this because I got my contact info. But just kind of so you know, I have some stuff up here. If you're in one of the other theaters, I don't know if anyone's in there, if I'm talking to an empty room, but I have some brochures if you want to grab some. I have my business cards up here. I have some cool stickers, CS Champions, CS Advocate. Who doesn't want stickers? But feel free to come and grab some, but I will take any questions anyone has. And I'm gonna, so I can see, there we go. Questions. You're gonna be like high school students. I gotta have my wait time. Go ahead.
So I get the impression that a lot of your target volunteer audience is probably working IT jobs like during the day. So can you speak a little bit about how they integrate this type of support with their work obligations?
Yeah. So to repeat the question for the other folks, he's asking how are people fitting this volunteer time into their work schedules. So I have some folks that their work is not supportive, unfortunately, and we work really hard to find those people's schools where their volunteering won't impact their work day, and typically we place them remotely, because then that way, if you're one of those people that still physically go into work, I talked to one yesterday, 1 out of 40. You could go drive into work, do your volunteering before you have to punch in, and then go from there. Like I said, most of the classes are offered from 8 to 9:30, 10 o'clock, depending on the school. But we do have times outside of that, but obviously during the school day. We don't do after school, we don't do weekends, we don't do summer, but I know lots of places to do that if you're interested. I have great partners in Cleveland, and a few in Cincinnati, but a lot of places are actually excited for volunteers. I've had people come back and been like, my boss is so supportive that I can just do this as part of my workday. Highland Software is like that. They consider volunteer work part of their workday. If you're not familiar with their educational programs and outreach, it's amazing. I know they've been having a tough time with the layoffs, but they still do amazing work in the community. So it really depends. And I always offer to talk to people's bosses, and nobody ever takes me up on that. I can be quite persuasive, I feel like. It's one of those, either it'll be good or it won't. But yeah, that's part of that interview process, is finding out what your schedule is, what our schools are. And if Ohio doesn't work in your schedule, my boss is very hopeful that I become an export region. I can send you out to the coasts. I can send you to Detroit. I have buddies and colleagues all over the country that would be happy to have a remote volunteer. In fact, Detroit is probably going to be banging on my door. So even if there's not a time that works for you here, we'll find you a place. We've been shuffling a volunteer around that wants to support AI at a specific time. We've tried 3 different managers. We finally found her a home up in Wisconsin. So we're very dedicated to finding you a place if this is something you want to do. Thank you for the question. More questions? I can see now. I'll do my wait time. Yes?
Yeah, what's your story? How did you get involved?
How did I get involved with TEALS? So I am one of the teachers that somewhat survived the pandemic. My degrees are in nothing to do with computer science. I have a Bachelor of Art and Crafts. Didn't use that so much. So I'm actually a school librarian by training. I have also worked in tech integration, which led to me having to learn more about computer science. Because if you tell a teacher anything to do with tech is in your role, they assume you know how to fix the computer and code it. We don't take that coursework. Instructional technology is not the same. But I taught through the pandemic. I've done virtual. I've taught kids on a computer with people in the room before. I've had all of that fun experience, so that's where I know how remote works. But I actually got headhunted off of LinkedIn. I was open to work because I'm one of those people, you should always be looking for your next opportunity, always looking for the next dream job, and somebody reached out and said, hey, you would be great at TEALS. It helped that I was hyper-local to Cleveland. Even though I've moved now, I still know more about Cleveland than I probably should. But that's how I came to it. So I actually have a very similar background to a lot of our teachers. I am completely self-taught. I stumbled through trying to teach kids how to code. I've tried almost every curriculum I could find, and I taught middle school, so TEALS wasn't something I could do. I actually knew about it before they came and found me, because I was like, ooh, I could have a volunteer in my classroom. No middle school. But that didn't deter me. I have actually had industry volunteers in my classroom, which is what TEALS loved. I was very into reaching out to my community and getting folks in. I had someone from the Department of Defense come in and talk about their career in computer science, a parent from Cleveland Clinic that talked about working in IT. I taught engineering too, so I had a unit on building animal enrichment manipulatives like you see at the zoo. I actually got a consultant from the Akron Zoo that also worked with Cleveland come in and show my students some of the manipulatives she made. So that helped me get my foot in the door. So I am familiar with working with volunteers, familiar with working virtually, how to teach computer science. So that's where I'm like, I like to be in touch with my volunteers because I have insight into the teacher mind. I'm always there to kind of support that side of things. Thank you for the question. All right. Hi. Yeah. So the question was about compensation for volunteering. We do not offer any kind of cash money compensation. We do a lot to show appreciation for our volunteers. Everybody gets cool TEALS t-shirts. They're different colors every year. We also do like a plaque to show your years of service. Sumit, that I mentioned earlier, because he's been a volunteer for 5 years, he gets a hoodie. We did Xbox Avatar hoodies one year. That didn't go so well. I don't think anyone even knows where their avatar is on Xbox anymore. Mine has the hoodie on. But we also, we have the appreciation events. We usually do dinner, dessert. I do coffee. I send out gift cards. I have a pile I still need to sell. So we do try to show appreciation, but it is pure volunteer work. Yes. Any other questions? Amanda, dance time again. I used to teach middle school. I used to be more lively. We good? Any questions from the other rooms? Nobody in there? Cool. All right. So it is 10:42. I think the next one starts at 11. Yes? He keeps giving me thumbs up. But if you have any additional questions, you want to come down and chat, grab some materials, feel free. And thank you for coming.